Welcome you all for this presentation on pharmacology of first-line antitubercular drugs. Specific learning objectives: at the end of the teaching learning session, the student should be able to explain the epidemiology of tuberculosis, classify the antitubercular drugs, describe the pharmacology of the first-line antitubercular drugs. Tuberculosis is a chronic granulomatous disease which is a major problem in developing countries. The reasons could be due to overcrowding, poverty, undernutrition, other health related problems, and even HIV/AIDS. About 1/3 of the world's population is infected with Mycobacterium tuberculosis bacilli. 15 to 20% of this infected population will develop tuberculosis in their lifetime. Whenever the immunity reduces, the infection will manifest itself into a disease. The Indian government has made tuberculosis as a notifiable disease from 2012 onwards. That means any physician who treats a patient of tuberculosis has to inform the government of India. The prevention and treatment of tuberculosis in our country is covered under RNTCP program, Revised National Tuberculosis Program from 1996. Guidelines as to the treatment of tuberculosis are given frequently. The latest revised guidelines is in 2016. The treatment for tuberculosis is provided free of cost, including the hospitalization charges, the diagnostic charges by the government of India. In 2014, 9.6 million new cases were reported around the globe, out of which 2.2 million tuberculosis patients were from India. Almost 25%. The maximum burden of tuberculosis for the past few years has been reported from India. There are approximately 600 deaths accounted due to tuberculosis every 24 hours in our country. In 1980s, there was the emergence of a new disease called HIV/AIDS, which increased the prevalence of tuberculosis because of reduced immunity. HIV/AIDS patients show more severe forms of tuberculosis as well as Mycobacterium avium intracellular complex infections caused by atypical mycobacteria. The new challenge which is posed to the treatment of tuberculosis is the emergence of multi-drug resistant tubercle bacilli. That means the tubercle bacilli in these patients, they are resistant to the first line antitubercular drugs, isoniazid and rifampicin, and any number of first line antitubercular drugs. So this is the challenge posed to the treatment of tuberculosis in the modern era. So this is what is multi-drug resistant tuberculosis. 3% of newly diagnosed cases of tuberculosis and 18% of retreated patients are found to be having multi-drug resistant tubercle bacilli. Classification of antitubercular drugs is as first-line drugs, second-line drugs. Second-line drugs can again be injectables, fluoroquinolones, and even second-line oral drugs. Isoniazid, rifampicin, pyrazinamide, ethambutol, streptomycin are the first-line antitubercular drugs. Kanamycin, amikacin, capreomycin are the injectables. Ofloxacin, levofloxacin, moxifloxacin, ciprofloxacin are the fluoroquinolones which are included under the second line antitubercular drugs. Ethionamide, prothionamide, cycloserine, para-aminosalicylic acid, terazidone, rifabutin and rifapentin are the second line antitubercular drugs which are given orally. There is another classification based on the hierarchy of efficacy and priority of these drugs. So we have 5 groups based on the efficacy and priority. Group 1, they are the first line oral antitubercular drugs: isoniazid, rifampicin, pyrazinamide, ethambutol. They are having the highest efficacy and the best tolerability amongst all antitubercular drugs. Group 2 are the injectables: kanamycin, amikacin, capreomycin, streptomycin. They are highly efficacious, they are sided in nature, but they have to be injected, which becomes a limitation or a drawback. Fluoroquinolones are group 3 because they are sidal, efficacious, they can be given orally, and a fluoroquinolone is always indicated in resistant cases. It is mandatory to give a fluoroquinolone in resistant cases of tuberculosis. As mentioned before, ofloxacin, levofloxacin, moxifloxacin and ciprofloxacin are the fluoroquinolones used as antitubercular agents. The group 5 includes the second line oral antituberculars: ethionamide, prothionamide, cycloserine, para-aminosalicylic acid, terazidone, rifabutin, rifapentin. They are all tuberculostatic in nature. They are less efficacious, more toxic. They are indicated in multi-drug resistant tuberculosis. That means they are reserved drugs used only in resistant cases. Group 5 antituberculars are having doubtful efficacy or unclear efficacy. It includes clarithromycin, clofazimine, linezolid, amoxicillin with clavulanic acid, imipenem with cilastatin, and one more drug is bedaquiline. These drugs, which are included under group 4, these antituberculars are indicated in extensively drug-resistant tuberculosis. Extensively drug-resistant tuberculosis means all MDR tuberculosis patients where the bacilli is resistant not only to isoniazid and rifampicin but also to the fluoroquinolones and the highly sidal injectables, that is kanamycin, amikacin and capreomycin. So XDR tuberculosis means the bacilli being resistant to 4 highly efficacious tuberculocidal drugs including isoniazid, rifampicin, fluoroquinolones, the injectable agents. Let us learn about the pharmacology of the first line antitubercular drugs, which includes isoniazid, rifampicin, pyrazinamide, ethambutol and streptomycin. Let us start off with isoniazid. It's an excellent antitubercular drug, the most efficacious antitubercular drug, because of which isoniazid needs to be present in all antitubercular regimens unless and until the patient is not tolerating it or if the tubercle bacilli are resistant to this compound. Isoniazid is sidal in nature. It is indicated only in tuberculosis, does not find use in any other infection. It is highly efficacious against the rapidly dividing tubercle bacilli. Isoniazid has excellent activity both extracellularly as well as intracellularly. Intracellular activity means its ability to kill the tubercle bacilli which are lodged in macrophages. Isoniazid has excellent activity in both acidic and alkaline pH. Acidic pH means intracellular bacilli, bacilli present at inflammatory sites which is usually seen during the initial stages of the infection, especially the first 2 months of tuberculosis. Isoniazid acts by interfering with the synthesis of some special fatty acid constituents of the tubercle bacilli, which is known as mycolic acid. So those tubercle bacilli which are exposed to isoniazid show reduced amount of fatty acids in their cell wall. Isoniazid, after entering into the tubercle bacilli, is converted into a reactive metabolite by an enzyme called catalase peroxidase. Catalase peroxidase is, it is associated with a gene called CAT-A gene. After being converted into the reactive metabolite, the metabolite interacts with two gene products, INHA and Cas-A, which are involved in mycolic acid synthesis. That means the reactive metabolite interferes with the gene products, and hence there is no formation of mycolic acid. 1 in 10 to the power of 6 bacilli, that means 1 in a million bacilli, are resistant to isoniazid in an inherent fashion, in a natural fashion. This is known as natural resistance, and the reason for that is mutation. That means 1 in 10 to the power of 6 bacilli is a mutant. It does not respond to the therapeutically attained concentrations of isoniazid. If isoniazid is used alone, these mutants, which are resistant bacilli, they proliferate, and what happens is it seems as though the sensitive population is replaced with a resistant one. The most common cause for resistance is mutation with the CAT-A gene, which is responsible for coding for the catalase peroxidase enzyme, which converts isoniazid into the reactive metabolite. In such cases, isoniazid has to be removed from treatment. Whereas mutation with INHA gene is also seen, but the mutation is of a lesser strength, and treatment can be continued with higher dose of isoniazid in such cases. Incidence of primary resistance, that means the patient has not been exposed to the drug before. The patient is exposed to the drug for the first time. That is, the patient is given isoniazid for the first time. Even though resistance may be seen, that is known as primary resistance. The incidence is approximately 8.5%. That means the patient has got the infection from another patient who is lodging resistant microorganisms against isoniazid. The daily dose of isoniazid is 5 mg per kg body weight. So for an adult, it comes to around 300 milligrams a day. Isoniazid is very well absorbed orally. The distribution happens into the tuberculous cavities, caseous masses, across the placenta, and even across the meninges. There is some pharmacogenetics associated with isoniazid. There is a genetic variation in its metabolism, that is acetylation. Isoniazid undergoes acetylation. So in any given population, there is a proportion of fast and slow acetylators with isoniazid, and the metabolized compound is excreted in the urine. The major adverse effect of isoniazid is hepatotoxicity, predominantly seen in alcoholics and those patients with pre-existing liver disease. So it is mandatory to do a liver function test before administering isoniazid in tubercular patients. Isoniazid also produces neurotoxicity as a dose dependent and duration of treatment dependent adverse effect. Manifestations being tingling sensation, burning sensation, which is otherwise called as paresthesias, mental confusion, and sometimes even convulsions. This is because isoniazid reduces the formation of the cofactor of pyridoxine, which is vitamin B6. Pyridoxal phosphate is formed in lesser quantities, and also isoniazid enhances its excretion. So to prevent neurotoxicity with isoniazid, prophylactic dose of vitamin B6 or pyridoxine 10 milligrams, and if neurotoxicity is already manifest, you have to treat it with 100 milligrams of pyridoxine. Prophylaxis with vitamin B6 is mandatory for alcoholics, malnourished patients, pregnancy, lactating mothers, and even the elderly who are administered isoniazid. Antacids can interfere with the absorption of isoniazid, so we have to increase the interval of administration of these two compounds. Isoniazid is a microsomal enzyme inhibitor, so you can expect some pharmacokinetic interactions at the level of metabolism or biotransformation. So you can expect isoniazid to increase the plasma concentration of the concurrently given drugs. The chances of toxicity will be more. So as we just discussed, there is pharmacogenetics associated with isoniazid. There is variability in the metabolism of isoniazid in the population. We have fast acetylatase and slow acetylatase. The half-life is 1 hour and 3 hours in fast and slow acetylatase. In the Indian population, you have 30 to 40% of the Indians who are fast acetylatase. 60 to 70% of the Indians are slow acetylatase. So what is the implication? Peripheral neuritis is more common in slow acetylators. So let us move on to the pharmacology of the second first-line antitubercular drug, rifampicin, which is otherwise called as rifampin. Isoniazid is synthetic in nature, whereas rifampicin is semi-synthetic. It is obtained from rifamycin B, which is in turn obtained from Streptomyces mediterranei, which is the soil actinomycetes. Rifampicin is equi-efficacious to isoniazid. That means it has excellent antitubercular activity. Both isoniazid and rifampicin are having better efficacy than any other antitubercular compound. In contrast to isoniazid, rifampicin is more efficacious against intermittently dividing bacilli, which are otherwise called as Pertus, although activity is exhibited against all subpopulations of tubercle bacilli. Rifampin, like isoniazid, is active against intra and extracellular tubercle bacilli. Like isoniazid, rifampicin is active in both acidic and alkaline pH. Rifampicin acts by interfering with the RNA synthesis in the tubercle bacilli by binding to and inhibiting the B subunit of DNA-dependent RNA polymerase, which is coded by a gene called RepoB gene. Now, unlike isoniazid, the incidence of mutants in tubercle bacilli is 1 in 10 to the power of 7, that is 1 bacilli in 10 million or 1 crore tubercle bacilli is naturally or intrinsically or inherently resistant to rifampicin. That means the incidence of primary resistance to rifampicin is relatively rare compared to isoniazid, that amounts to 2%. The resistance which is seen towards rifampicin from the tubercle bacilli is due to the mutation in the RepoB gene, which codes for the B subunit of the DNA-dependent RNA polymerase, and in the process preventing the binding of rifampicin to this enzyme. Rifampicin, apart from being active against tubercle bacilli, is also useful against certain gram-positive and gram-negative bacteria, which includes meningococci, Haemophilus influenza, Brucella, Legionella, Staphylococcus aureus, and even some Enterobacteriaceae like E. coli, Proteus, Pseudomonas, etc. Atypical mycobacteria, with the exception of Mycobacterium forticium, are susceptible to rifampin. Like isoniazid, rifampicin also causes hepatotoxicity in a dose-related and duration-related matter. Pre-existing liver disease patients are more susceptible to the hepatotoxic nature of rifampicin. So again, liver function test is mandatory before introducing rifampicin. If we encounter jaundice in our patients during treatment with rifampicin, we have to discontinue this compound. Other rare but serious adverse effects which also indicate discontinuation of rifampicin includes hemolysis, shock, purpura and renal failure. And unlike isoniazid, rifampicin is a microsomal enzyme inducer. That means any compound given along with rifampicin, its efficacy is reduced because its metabolism is enhanced, its plasma concentration comes down. Rifampicin is associated with orange-red discoloration of the body secretions, that is saliva, tears, urine, etc. can become orange-red in color. There is nothing to be afraid of this because it is not harmful, but the patient has to be educated about this aspect of rifampicin. Less serious adverse effects where we need not discontinue rifampicin. Rifampicin may be continued whenever there is a flu-like syndrome associated with fever, body pains, malaise, etc. Abdominal syndrome wherein the patient complains of abdominal pain, nausea, vomiting, loose stools, etc. Cutaneous syndrome, which is associated with flushing, rashes, itching, etc. We can continue with rifampicin in these situations. Apart from tuberculosis, rifampicin is also preferred, indicated in the treatment of leprosy, where it has a major role. It has a cidal action against Mycobacterium leprae. Rifampicin is a second-line drug for the treatment of methicillin-resistant Staphylococcus aureus, diphtheroids, Legionella pneumonia. It is preferred as prophylactic agent whenever there is an epidemic of meningitis due to meningococci as well as Haemophilus influenza. It is also used in the treatment of carriers. Along with doxycycline, rifampicin is the first-line treatment for brucellosis. Both these compounds are given for a period of 6 weeks. Doxycycline 100 milligrams twice a day, rifampicin 600 milligrams a day. Now let us discuss and learn about the pharmacology of another first-line antitubercular drug, which is called as pyrazinamide. Pyrazinamide is chemically similar to isoniazid. Isoniazid was introduced somewhere in the 1950s. If I am correct, it was introduced in 1950s, 1952. Pyrazinamide was also introduced at the same time because it is chemically similar to isoniazid. Pyrazinamide is also tuberculocidal in nature, although it is less efficacious than isoniazid. This compound acts best in acidic pH. That means it is highly efficacious against the tubercle bacilli in inflammatory lesions and those bacilli which are present intracellularly. Inflammation is the highest during the first 2 months of the tuberculosis infection. That is the period when pyrazinamide is most efficacious. Like isoniazid, pyrazinamide is also converted to an active metabolite, pyrazinoic acid, by an enzyme called pyrazinamidase. This enzyme is coded by a gene called PNCA gene. Resistance towards pyrazinamide is due to mutation of this gene, PNCA gene, which codes for the enzyme pyrazinamidase. So what happens is the enzyme cannot convert pyrazinamide into the active metabolite, and the active metabolite is required to produce the antitubercular action. Now pyrazinamide, when included in the antitubercular regimen, reduces the duration of treatment and also prevents the emergence of resistance. And pyrazinamide also interferes with mycolic acid synthesis like isoniazid, although by interacting with a different enzyme. Hepatotoxicity once again is an important adverse effect of pyrazinamide, and this compound is contraindicated in patients with liver disease. So once again, before introducing pyrazinamide, it is mandatory to do liver function test. This compound commonly causes hyperuricemia. This is because of interference with the uric acid excretion by pyrazinamide. This compound also produces major fluctuations in the management of diabetic patients. It is mandatory to monitor plasma glucose levels whenever the patient is put on pyrazinamide. Ethambutol is the fourth first-line antitubercular agent. This compound is selectively tuberculostatic. The first three compounds what we saw, isoniazid, rifampicin and pyrazinamide, are tuberculocidal, but ethambutol is selectively tuberculostatic. That means it has action only against tubercle bacilli. It doesn't have activity on any other bacteria apart from mycobacteria. Ethambutol is also used in the treatment of atypical mycobacterial infections. Ethambutol produces its antitubercular action by inhibiting the enzyme called arabinosyl transferases, and in the process interferes with the synthesis of arabinogalactan. And the implication is there is an inhibition in the incorporation of mycolic acid. Arabinosyl transferases are encoded by a gene called EMB-AB. So this gene EMB-AB, if it undergoes mutation, there is going to be resistance towards ethambutol, because ethambutol will not be able to inhibit the arabinosyl transferase. Ethambutol, when included in antitubercular regimen, hastens sputum conversion. That means it converts sputum positivity into sputum negativity and prevents the emergence of resistance, because of which it is included in the antitubercular regimens. Patients who are put on ethambutol may complain of visual problems, which could be in the form of diminution or reduction in visual acuity, defects with color vision, defects with field of vision, because of retrobulbar neuritis which is caused by ethambutol. However, early reporting and stopping of ethambutol reverses this adverse effect. Please remember, even hepatitis or hepatotoxicity, which may be seen during the treatment of isoniazid, rifampicin and pyrazinamide, is reversible if we stop the drug early during the treatment and early when we detect hepatotoxicity. Now let us move on to the fifth first-line antitubercular drug. It is called as streptomycin. As we have already studied, streptomycin belongs to the class of aminoglycosides. In fact, streptomycin was the first antitubercular drug to be used. Streptomycin was discovered in 1944 by Waxman, and it was introduced into the treatment of tuberculosis in 1947. The use of streptomycin was enhanced by the introduction of isoniazid in 1952. Parallel to the discovery of isoniazid, pyrazinamide was introduced. In 1961, ethambutol was introduced. In 1962, rifampicin was introduced. Now, in contrast to the other four antitubercular drugs, isoniazid, rifampicin, pyrazinamide and ethambutol, which are administered orally, streptomycin is an injectable first-line antitubercular agent. Streptomycin, being an aminoglycoside, ionizes in solution. That means it cannot penetrate the cells. Streptomycin only has extracellular antitubercular action. Being an aminoglycoside, streptomycin produces dose-related, duration of treatment-related nephrotoxicity and ototoxicity, because it affects the 8th cranial nerve, vestibulocochlear nerve. Because of these limitations of streptomycin, that is, it is an injectable, it produces toxicity, it is having a lesser therapeutic index, It is a supplementary first-line anti-tubercular drug. Now this slide tells us the daily dose of the first-line anti-tubercular drugs. Isoniazid 5 mg per kg body weight. In an adult, the daily dose amounts to 300 milligrams. Rifampicin is given in a dose of 10 mg per kg body weight. In an adult, the dose comes to 600 mg daily dose. Pyrazinamide is administered in a dose of 25 mg per kg body weight. It comes to 1.5 gram as a daily dose. Ethambutol and streptomycin are administered as 15 mg per kg body weight. It comes to around 1 gram per day. Dear students, we have come to the end of this lecture session on pharmacology of first-line anti-tubercular drugs. We have studied effectively the epidemiology of tuberculosis. We have learnt the classification of the anti-tubercular drugs. We have learnt the pharmacology of the first-line anti-tubercular drugs. To summarize, anti-tubercular drugs are indicated as multi-drug treatment for the treatment of tuberculosis because inherently in the population of the tubercle bacilli we have mutants. As we have seen, there are certain tubercle bacilli which do not respond to the therapeutically used doses of the anti-tubercular drugs. So a mutant which does not respond to isoniazid is killed by rifampicin. A mutant which does not respond to rifampicin is killed by isoniazid. A mutant which does not respond to both isoniazid and rifampicin is killed by the third anti-tubercular agent and even by the host defense mechanisms. And since treatment of tuberculosis is for a long time, that means at least 6 to 9 months minimum, it is called as a short-term chemotherapy regimens which were introduced in 1970s. And based on these regimens, as we see, we have to use these drugs for a long period. So to prevent the emergence of resistance, we use anti-tubercular compounds as multi-drug treatment. Other conditions where we use multi-drug treatment is in HIV or AIDS, in the treatment of leprosy, in the treatment of H. pylori infections. Thank you very much for your enthusiasm, for your cooperation, support and encouragement. Happy reading. Take care of your health. Thank you.